Welcome into the Illinicast. I'm a little bit more chipper. It's the end of the week. I know that the Illini game might not go the way that we want it to on Saturday with Penn State coming into town, but crazier things have happened in the world of college football. But again, we are getting close to the weekend, so getting excited. Sonny, how is your week gone post Kansas?
Week so far so good. This is going to be the biggest football game of the season for us, and things don't look like they're going to go so well. But there's no such thing as a bad week when there's college football to watch. So I'm going to stay positive.
Absolutely. I mean, who would have thought that Illinois would have went into Happy Valley in 2021 and secured a victory, let alone in the crazy way that they did secure the victory. But a victory is a victory, and that's what Illinois is striving for. This particular week, they're hosting a Penn State team at 11 a.m. on Fox. But Big Noon Kickoff is headed to Colorado, so don't get excited about Grange Grove being filled with the likes of Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush.
Yeah, I feel bad for the people who paid exorbitant prices to kind of be there for that weekend. Try to be a part of all the festivities and whatnot, but we didn't look good against Kansas. So on one hand, I don't really blame the Fox executives.
I don't think there was much that Illinois could have done to get them to Champaign anyway. They could have blown the brakes off of Kansas 55 to nothing, 2-0 Penn State, 2-0 Illinois. Maybe Illinois is receiving some votes in the top 25. I still think they would have gone to Colorado and Deion
Really.
Sanders, and I think they're following this story until they can't anymore. I think it's too much of a breadwinner for them. Pat McAfee show is going to be there on Friday. College Game Day is going to be there. The Rock is going to be in Boulder, Colorado on Friday for the Pat McAfee show. I mean, it's like the guaranteed thing right now in the world of sports media, and that's something that really isn't done unless you are the NFL. The NFL is the only guarantee, and now that Deion Sanders is at Colorado, Colorado becomes a guarantee as well until they start to lose. Maybe they lose to Colorado State, and then the hype is starting to get drained a little bit from that hype train that is the Deion Sanders primetime show. But we are not here to talk about Deion Sanders and the primetime show. We are here to talk about Illinois, Penn State, and Penn State is 14 and a half point favorites. What are your initial impressions on this game, Sonny?
My initial impressions aren't good, and I hope by the end of the game that nobody gets hurt. Um, it's one of those I watched on Big Ten Network they have those recaps of games in 60 minutes where they basically fast forward through the special teams plays and the timeouts. Penn State looks good, and Drew Aller is living up to all the hype. They seem to be a finely tuned machine right now. They seem to all know their roles. Drew Aller just does not make turnovers. I was listening to a Penn State a gentleman basically tell me that it took him like the 13th spring practice, to throw his first interception. So they're going to be tough to beat. Whereas obviously we're coming off of unfortunate loss to Kansas, where we have a lot of question marks. So it's going to be a tough battle for us on Saturday.
Drew Aller is not going to escape the pocket like the other two quarterbacks that Illinois has faced, but I do feel like that he is going to be a master at reading the defense of whatever Illinois is bringing to him. And that's going to be looking at his first read, looking at his second read, looking at the tight end, and he's just going to deliver the ball in the right spot to the right person at the right time. And that's what scares me about this game is that he's just going to dissect this Illinois defense from the opening kickoff until the final drive unless he's pulled out of the game because Penn State is blowing Illinois out. So that's kind of what scares me a lot about this game is that Drew Aller seems to be that kind of guy, that kind of methodical passer, and he has the weapons to help him out. So this is going to be a tough task for the secondary. It's going to be an even tougher task for this linebacker crew against these Penn State tight ends.
Yeah, I mean, we looked slow and outmatched against Kansas last Friday, and Penn State is faster, stronger, and more talented. So, we're not really built as is to make big comebacks. So, trying to maintain being within striking distance in that first half, I think, is going to be super important on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to control the tempo. I think you need to get Isaiah Williams going in the screen game if you're the Illinois offense and get the running game going as best as you can. I don't know if that's a change of the offensive line or rotation that Brett Bielema has in this offensive line, because if you are three and outing every single time, that's going to be a long day for those in attendance in Champaign.
I think what's going to be very important for Illinois Saturday is I would receive the kickoff and I would try to have a good 6, 7, 8 minute methodical drive with a touchdown as a result. I think that would just kind of build the confidence of this team, which I think it's sorely lacking right now, and just kind of sets them up to be the opposite of what happened with Kansas and Toledo, and just say, "Hey, look, you know we had a really successful year last year. We have high expectations this year. Everyone's forgotten about us already 2 weeks, and we're here, and we're here to compete for the Big Ten West."
And I know that there might be just little incremental things that we want to see from the Illini. I mentioned it last week or the last episode. How about just winning the penalty battle? Like, that seems to be a step that Illinois needs to take to get to the right direction of their season, because if they constantly are losing the penalty battle, that's just going to make their drive their drives and their defense work so much harder, and there's not a lot of margin for error on this Illini football team at the moment. So if you win the penalty battle, at least that gives you a somewhat of a chance to at least compete in these games.
Yeah, I'm that's going to be super important. After Penn State, a lot of the teams that we're playing are going to be pretty much at our talent level and below. So fixing the penalties, you can give away a game by taking on so many penalties. So fix the discipline. I'm sure the coaching staff is on the players. This can't just keep happening. And again, you spot 8, 9 penalties to Penn State, and they're going to put a 40 on you before halftime.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Penn State team that beat West Virginia 38-15, and I think Kansas is a little bit better of a team than West Virginia in that Big 12, but again, they won their Big 10 versus Big 12 battle, and then they destroyed a Delaware team 63-7, which I don't really consider that much of a matchup for the Penn State Nittany Lions. But I mean, you look at their 3 games from last year, their last 3 games. They beat Utah 35-21, which is a very good program in their bowl game last year. Michigan State, they won 35-16. Rutgers, they won 55-10. So this is a Penn State team that hasn't experienced a lot of losing. So they're experienced in showing how not to lose games. And this new Illinois team, especially with how they ended last year, they need to figure out how to win some of these battles once again.
And the media has been bringing up that 9 overtime game to James Franklin constantly, so it's on the back of his mind. I think he would want nothing more than to blow us out. Get that game out of his memory, no longer being brought up. We got a handful on our plate, Austin.
Yes. I mean, total yards allowed per game for the Penn State Nittany Lions, 224. Illinois has allowed 477 and a half yards per game. That is not going to get the job done, especially against a quarterback like the ilk of Drew Aller, who probably would be a top 10 quarterback in this year's NFL draft.
Yeah, he's completely lived up to his hype, and like I say, he doesn't make mistakes. Which as a sophomore, you think he's a younger quarterback. I know he played 10 games last year, but he's obviously a step up from Clifford, and he's kind of put Penn State on the same trajectory as Michigan and Ohio State, whereas that's kind of where always a step below. now they're kind of at that level, and it's because they've got one of the best quarterbacks in the country.
Yeah, it definitely feels like two programs that are kind of going on that opposite trend. I know 2 games really isn't fair to judge the Illini on, but it feels like the trajectory of this Penn State program is skyrocketing as we speak because of the talent that they have in their wide receiver room with Lambert Smith, the duo running backs for Penn State, and then Drew Aller, and then that defense, especially in that secondary. I mean, this is a team that's expectations have shifted in a way that they haven't seen in quite a while. And this Illinois team, the expectations are rising while the quality on the field, at least throughout the last 2 games, and if you conclude the last stretch of games against Mississippi State and how they ended Big Ten play for Illinois, it feels like the trajectory of these programs are kind of going in opposite directions.
Yeah, it's nice that we had an extra day of rest to kind of game plan and have the coaches try to figure out some of the issues they've had the first 2 weeks. We've kind of alluded to this before. There's no way I can see us marching the same 5 guys in our offensive line in the same position. So I'm really interested to see who trots out at what position. It'll be nice to see Matt Bailey out there. I don't know how much
Mhm.
he's going to play, but just adding another playmaker to our secondary. The minute he makes a nice play, that could energize the stadium. That could energize our team a little bit. So it's they've had an extra day to work on it. I really want to see what Brett and staff, what kind of adjustments they come up with.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what Aaron this is a true test for Aaron Henry. Last 2 games have not gone the way that Aaron Henry would want them to go, and he's basically said that everything is on the table. I want to see what's on the table. Is it more blitzing? Is it switching to zone full time because you may not have the manpower to handle a man to man defense and man coverage for against a like a Penn State? So I don't know what the answer is, but I'm excited to see what Aaron Henry thinks is the answer, and it's going to go a long way of deciding is Aaron Henry the guy for the future? Is he going to be the play caller for the rest of the year? Is it going to go back to Brett Bielema's hands if this game goes sour?
I'm not sure if I put that much pressure on Aaron Henry for this game, just because I think the talent is just so outmatched. But I think he needs to not embarrass himself this week, and then the microscope is on with Florida Atlantic and the games after that, because that's when it's going to make or break our season. Not a lot of people are predicting us to win on Saturday to begin with, but this is kind of we want to see Aaron Henry. Just again, what kind of adjustments you got in mind? Let's not do the bend don't break. We were an aggressive team last year. Let's give the confidence to our players to make those plays. Barry Lenny Jr., I mean, it seems like it's been a year and a half of him trying to figure out what he wants to do on offense. So I think, we may not win the game, but I just want to see an improvement from each side that'll instill confidence for me to still win the 8 games I still think that we're capable of winning.
Look, Aaron Henry could draw up a great scheme, and Illinois just may not have the firepower to win this game on defense. But I at least want to see Illinois be able to slow down the perceived strength of Penn State, whatever Aaron Henry thinks that is. You looked at Toledo and that game. He it seemed surprised that there was a lot of rushing going on by the Toledo offense. Then you looked at the Kansas game, and the option attack was just making Illinois go stir crazy. There was bad angles of tackles and everything. So I kind of want to just see if Aaron Henry can see the perceived strength of Penn State and slow that strength down just a touch. I feel like that would give me a lot more confidence in Aaron Henry, at least knowing how to slow down that perceived strength.
And no more allowing third down conversions from, 9 of the
Yes.
13 you said last week.
Yep.
I mean, stuff like that we want to see fixed. That's something no matter who you play, you get them on a third down, third and long. You have to have the talent is there. Okay, it may not be the talent from last year, but you still have a very good team in place that should be able to convert the third down to fourth down to get the ball back for the offense. Because otherwise, the defense just stays on the field too long. They get tired, and Drew Aller is going to take advantage of a tired defense.
Absolutely, he is, and I just want, and offensively, Barry Lenny Jr. is not he's not blameless in what's going on either. I mean, the third and shorts and the fourth and shorts, he has got to figure out as well. And taking away some of those possessions from Drew Aller and this Penn State offense can help make Aaron Henry look a little bit better as well. So I think Barry Lenny Jr. has some things to prove in terms of how he draws up some of those short yardage situations that Illinois has struggled with him as the offensive coordinator these past year and 2 games.
I think it'd be argued that Barry Lundy Jr. is more important to a victory on Saturday than Aaron Henry is. If we play, we find our running back, we waste time, we find a good game plan, and we take the ball out of Drew Aller's hands, that's our chance to win. We're not going to win a game that goes the over of like I think the over under is like 48 and a half or something like that. If we win, it's going to be a 21-13 type of game. Slow it down, get a lead early, take advantage of this new clock. Hand the ball off, have Luke make passes when he needs to, finds the wide receivers who hopefully decide to show up this game. I think, as long as Barry Lunny has the right game plan in mind and we can execute, that's where I think the potential for victory comes in.
I mean, you look at these last 2 games offensively, Luke Altmaier is leading the team in rushing with 139 yards. Reggie Love III has 108 yards. Josh McCray has 50. And then Isaiah Williams has 7. Caden Fegan has 5. And then Griffin Moore in that infamous 4th down and 1 has -1 yard rushing. I need to see a running back lead the team in rushing. Like,
Yeah.
and that's with Luke Altmaier having a good game. I just want to see Reggie Love Jr. take control of this running back room, or at least somebody. I don't care who it is. I just want to see a running back have the lead in rushing at the end of this game, because that's the Brett Bielema identity. And the minute that you don't have an identity is the minute that your football team, for at least for that season, can take a tumble. And that's kind of concerning me about this year's team, is that that identity just hasn't been built up. And you thought with a Brett Bielema coach team, that'd be pretty easy to instill.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just, Altmaier not lead us in rushing yards, but I want to see 30, 35 rushing attempts on Saturday.
Yeah.
I think we had about a dozen last week, which completely threw off the game plan. And that's why I think that first half, the microscope is on Barry Lenny Jr., like extending our drives, wasting that clock, make them respect our run so that Luke Altmaier can make the plays that I think he's capable of making. I think, I think they're going to use Griffin uh, more. I think, he's kind of proved himself to the coaching staff now. And, I really want to see some of the wide receivers step up, because this is big boy football now. This is the biggest game on our schedule. Isaiah Williams knows there's going to be NFL people watching. I hope they have something drawn up for Malik Elzy, because he's the one guy who, talent wise, could start on the opposite team as well. So again, they've got a lot on their plate, but I think the blueprint is there. Whether they're able to execute it or not, I don't know.
Our leading running backs in the last 2 games against Toledo, there was 12 rushes from the running back. That was the most of a running back. And then against Kansas, it was 8. That's not how you win for a Brett Bielema team. So yeah, I think getting that running game established, and then you can open up things for Griffin Moore in the passing game, throwing a 5 yard out, throwing a slant pattern to a tight end. I think those kind of things can open some things up for the outside where Pat Bryant can get going, and then getting some things with Isaiah Williams to spread the field out horizontally. I mean, I know there are some weapons that Illinois just hasn't used to their fullest extent this year, as opposed to that Pat Bryant 2 touchdown game against Toledo. I mean, he's the only guy that has really you as a weapon has been utilized to his fullest potential in a game so far. The rest of the guys, it feels like there's always something that you need more from in terms of this offense.
Yeah, we've had the best wide receiver room we've had in years. We have the best quarterback we've had in years. Let's show it on the field.
Yep.
I know we're struggling with the offensive line, and hopefully we make the adjustments that need to be made there because talent wise, especially on offense, this is one of the most offensively talented teams that I remember watching for us. It's just that's what's been such a bummer about the first two games of us not being able to maximize that talent because of our issues up front.
Exactly. And these wide receivers are going to have a challenge with the Penn State defensive backs and in what they bring. So that leads to Griffin Moore. He has got to step up for this game. And I think he did against Kansas. He had a great game. So I think that needs to continue. And then that interior of this offensive line needs to really show up. I think that's going to be huge for this team and the potential to pull off this upset to get that ball control offense going. So that's kind of that's kind of where I'm at in this game of like kind of the keys for Illinois success.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be so deflating if on the first drive we get the ball and there's two sacks by the Penn State defense. I think everyone's just gonna kind of look around, and I think the whole energy gets deflated there. Like, oh no, we know how this is gonna end. So that first drive, I think, is gonna be super important. I think us scoring first is gonna be super important. Try to limit the big plays. I know they got two really good running backs, but if I'm Brett Bielema, I would try to, I don't know. Yeah, he gets paid to figure this stuff out, but I would just focus on our offense, try to hold on to the ball, get our running backs 30, 35 carries, and try to get our wide receivers involved. And, just trust Aaron Henry and that, he made the right decision and we can play aggressive again. Because right now, I just feel like when I watched the 60-minute recap of the Illinois game, our guys just weren't going aggressively at the guys that they were about to tackle. It seemed more they were thinking about their role, like, oh, I'm supposed to go here, I'm supposed to get this guy, as opposed to working on instinct like last year's team was, which made us so dangerous.
Yes, we'll get to our predictions of this Illinois Penn State game after we interview Alec of the Big Banter Penn State podcast, 3B PSU. So let's go through these Big Ten slate of week 3 going on. Virginia travels to Maryland for a Friday night kickoff. That'll be on FS1 tomorrow night. Who do you got in that one?
Well, the big banter Maryland guys have Maryland pretty much competing for a national championship. So I'm going to go ahead and say Maryland takes care of business.
Yeah, same here. Virginia is on the struggle bus ever since Bronco Mendenhall retired. It seems like they are kind of a boat without a captain at the moment. We have Louisville, where I'm currently located, going to Bloomington to take on the Indiana Hoosiers and Louisville. They are 10-point favorites in that Saturday matchup. Who do you got?
I got Louisville, but I think Indiana can cover 10 points. They haven't looked awful, and they've had a really tough schedule themselves too. So I think I'll take the points with Indiana.
I mean, anytime you can at least make Ohio State sweat for at least a couple seconds, showcases that you can at least compete with the middle tier of another conference. So I think Indiana can cover that as well, but Louisville does pick up the victory. Georgia Southern goes up against Wisconsin. Wisconsin is 20-point favorites in this game.
I mean, Wisconsin has to win this game. Um, I think I was pretty vocal that I didn't think that Wisconsin was going to live up to their preseason hype. I just read an article that Braylon Allen had a sit down conversation with Fickle about having, I think, only 7 rushes last game. Um, I think they have things to figure out, and I think this is a game where Luke Fickle's going to try to really put his foot down, win by 3, 4, 5 touchdowns, and just try to calm that Badger Nation down a little bit.
Yeah, I think we are. I think I'm going with Wisconsin as well. Covering this, I think they have some frustrations to go up to get out against that game they had against Washington State. It must be Big Ten versus ACC week
Yeah, I think there's like 5 or
because
6 games, right?
yeah, so
Yeah.
Illinois missed the boat on the Big Ten ACC Challenge football version, I guess. Minnesota travels to North Carolina and UNC. They are 7.5 point favorites, especially with the quarterback play of Luke May. Is it Luke May or Drake May? There's a lot
Drake.
of Mays out there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Uh,
I think it's in Chapel Hill. Um,
yes.
I think they'll win the game. I just don't trust anything from Minnesota in regards to producing an offense. So I'll go with the good quarterback.
Yep, quarterback play seems to trump anything in the Big Ten West. Illinois kind of showcased that against Jalen Daniels. So I have got to go with North Carolina. And until a Big Ten West team says they can score points, I will not believe them. So North Carolina, I think they cover that spread. Again, another Big Ten ACC matchup. We got Northwestern going up against Duke, and Duke is 16.5 point favorites.
I think Duke covers 16.5 pretty comfortably. Northwestern, I hope they enjoyed themselves last week. I still thought it was a surprise that they were underdogs at home to UTEP, and I think they were a little offended by that. But Duke is quite the step up from UTEP, so I think Duke is well coached. I think they'll take care of business.
I'm kind of shocked that Northwestern didn't rush the field for upsetting UTEP, being home underdogs and dousing their interim coach with Gatorade and everything, showcasing that Northwestern is back, folks. But yeah, Duke takes care of business here. Western Michigan, PJ Fleck's old rowing boat partners, they take on Iowa. Iowa is 28.5 point favorites after beating in-state rival Iowa State.
How many point favorites?
They are 28.5 point favorites.
See, on one hand, I think I would definitely take the points with Western Michigan because I mean, Iowa's looked like Iowa this year. Their defense is suffocating. But I did watch the game against Iowa State, and their offense, I think, only had 1 or 2 offensive touchdowns. Like they're
Yeah.
still Iowa. You know, there's no difference on that side of the ball. But then again, I think this is the last opportunity for Friends for a while to start padding that offensive point total for his contract. So I think I'm going to stick with Western Michigan and taking the points.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Brian Ferentz, you need to score some points, and you need to score 25 points to be able to cover a 28.5 point spread. You got to have that baby step in there. So I'm going to go with the points with Western Michigan there. Virginia Tech and Rutgers. Virginia Tech travels to East Piscataway. Rutgers 7.5, 7 point favorites, pardon me, in that game.
Rutgers 7. That's who Purdue beat last week, right?
Yeah.
See, I don't get it. Like, you know, a lot of people trying to hype Purdue to me because of that victory. I get it. It was in Blacksburg, and that itself is always going to be impressive. But I mean, they're 7 point dogs to Rutgers. And I know Rutgers has actually looked pretty decent this year, but I think I'm just trying to throw some unnecessary shade at Purdue. Disregard that. Um, I think I like Rutgers this year. From what I've been reading of them, they're kind of performing pretty well. I can't believe I'm saying this. I'll lay the 7.5 with Rutgers.
Yeah, me too. I think this Virginia Tech team is broken. I think it's a little bit new of what Virginia Tech is known for in their defense, and their defense has struggled immensely these last couple years. I think they need to uh, change things up, maybe get a new coach in there, especially in this ACC, or else you're going to fall behind even further than the Virginia Tech Hokies are. So I think I'm going to go with Rutgers as well. Western Kentucky takes on Ohio State. Ohio State 29.5 point favorites. I think Ohio State covers that pretty easily.
Have they covered yet this year though? That's the only thing. Like they're still trying to figure out this quarterback situation.
Yeah.
I I I don't think they cover. I think they're basically going to try to win this game in the first quarter because and keep everyone healthy because that week 4 showdown with Notre Dame, that's going to be the game that they're going to be have their eyes towards. So I think it's lower scoring. Ohio State tries to get a big lead and just milk that clock and go home healthy.
All right. We have Washington, the number 8 team in the country, traveling to East Lansing to take on the Michigan State Spartans. Washington, they are 16.5 point favorites, and we know about the drama slash the sickness that's going on in East Lansing.
Was this a nighttime game?
It is. It is 5 p.m. Eastern on Peacock.
5 p.m. Eastern, so 4. Okay. I think it was a nighttime game. Crazy things happen at night, but I really like Washington. I think they could be a top 5, top 6 team this year. So I think they'll go into East Lansing. I think they'll take care of business over there.
I mean, I think Michael Penix has like a new. It feels like he almost has like a new posse to bring to these Big Ten stadiums because he got embarrassed a lot as the quarterback of the Indiana Hoosiers because they just didn't have the the guys to contend against some of these teams. So I think this is going to be part of the Michael Penix Jr. Revenge tour. So I think they do cover that, and I think this Michigan State Spartan team is going to be reeling after the Mel Tucker news.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's Michigan State is a really. I mean, it's what a 6 to 12 job. In the Big Ten, so it's going to be a highly coveted job. I know they obviously have money. They spent
Mhm.
$95 million on Mel Tucker, so it's going to be curious to see what happens with that whole legal situation. I know technically he hasn't been fired yet, but from what I've gathered, that's just for legality purposes. Moving forward, I think there's going to be a new head coach at Michigan State, and it's going to be interesting to me to see how the team responds the rest of the season because they've looked pretty decent the first 2 games. I believe they're 2-0.
Yes, absolutely they are. Next game is the Northern Illinois Huskies taking on the Nebraska Cornhuskers in Lincoln. Nebraska's 0-2. NIU is 1-1. They beat Boston College in overtime, but that's a bad Boston College team. And then they lost to in-state SIU this past Saturday. So NIU versus Nebraska. Nebraska is 11-point favorites. I'm surprised it's only 11 points.
Yeah, I'll lay the points with Nebraska, but you can never count out NIU. I spent some time in college there. They're a fun football team. They take their football seriously. I think they got a pretty decent head coach there. I don't know what happened last week, but I think Nebraska knows they need to win this game. Otherwise, that Husker Nation, they're going to get rowdy. And I really think that, there may not be many victories for Matt Rule this year, but this is one where they've got to put their foot down and show that, hey, we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, this is about pride. I think they come out in Lincoln and blow the doors off of NIU. That is not a good NIU team. I watched them take on the Salukis. Their quarterback play is very suspect. And so I think Nebraska wins this pretty handily. Next up is Bowling Green versus Michigan. I believe it's the last game of Jim Harbaugh's suspension. So Michigan 40.5 point favorites. Don't have to talk about this much.
No.
Michigan wins and they'll win by however much they want to win,
Yeah, it's up
essentially.
to them. It's up to them.
Yep. Then this is probably the most intriguing matchup of the weekend outside of Illinois and Penn State in Champaign, at least. Syracuse at 2-0 is heading to West Lafayette to take on the Purdue Boilermakers. Syracuse is 2.5 point favorites, and this game will be in prime time on NBC.
All eyes are going to be on Ryan Walters and Hudson Card. I think, I think they come out victorious. I think they built up a lot of confidence last week against not a good team, but in a tough environment. And I think having this game at home under the lights again, fun things happen under the lights, and I think Purdue goes to 2-1.
I think Syracuse wins this game simply because that Purdue defense isn't ready for prime time still. Syracuse has 586 yards of offense so far this year, and Purdue has allowed 386 and a half yards of offense this year. So I think Syracuse's offense is going to be a little bit too much for that Purdue defense to handle.
I hope you're right. A lot of our recruiting battles are straight with Purdue, so if all things go the way they're projected, we might be 1-2 at the end of this week. I'd prefer Purdue to be 1-2 as well.
Absolutely. It's very possible. Sonny, I want to say this was a great segment, and let's bring Alec aboard to talk about the Penn State and Illinois matchup from the Nittany Lions perspective. How about that?
Let's do it.
All right. Coming up next is Alec from 3B PSU. Cast, or at least the second half of the episode, in with Alex of 3B PSU. How's it going, Alec?
It's going good. How are you guys doing?
We are doing well. We would be doing better if it was two 2-0 teams going up
Yeah.
against each other this weekend, and that big noon kickoff would be in Champaign. But Deion Sanders is a little bit more important in the college football world right now.
Yeah. He's kind of hogging it right now, it seems like.
Yeah. I had a good time on Alec's podcast 2 days ago. We kind of previewed the Penn State Illinois game, and a bunch of wonderful folks. I suggest you subscribe to them, and hopefully the Penn State football team is going to be as nice to our Illini football team as they were to me.
Yeah, we'll see, I guess. It's going to be a good one.
So,
Is it?
Alec, this is kind of where I want to start with.
All right.
Are you spoiled as a Penn State fan, or is there something that you're wanting more? Like, what is the life like of a Penn State football fan, I guess?
I guess the best way to put it is maybe a tease. You're really pleased with winning 3 New Year's Six Bowls the last 6 years or whatever it was, going to 4, winning a Big Ten championship, 4 11-win seasons in that span. But you've also kind of been, you had Ohio State on the ropes twice where you let them off. You should have won those games in 17 and 18. Pretty much you were even, if not ahead of Michigan during the COVID season, and then just let them blow right past you pretty much. I think you're not mad with where you're at, but you've also kind of seen glimpses of it. It can be more. We just haven't gotten there yet is kind of the best way to put it.
Do you think your quarterback now is the guy to lead you to more, to reach that next level of the Michigans and Ohio States?
Yeah, I mean, so far it looks that way. Obviously, West Virginia, I think, is a better team than they were giving credit for. I saw they were picked to finish last in the Big 12. I don't know about that, but I also think at the same time they were a little weak on the back end of the secondary. So Penn State did carve them up there. I don't know how much you could buy into that. And then Delaware, the blue and white spring scrimmage game was more entertaining, competitive than that, honestly. So I don't take anything out of that. I'm just happy they got out of it healthy, and young guys got to play. So the talent is definitely there. The way he stepped up in the pocket and looked downfield is something we haven't really seen. It's not Clifford kind of struggled with the second read, and McSorley was kind of the screw it. I have a future NFLer in Chris Godwin or Mike Gesicki down there somewhere. So I think here we've seen a little more of actually going through progressions, looking for the open guy, waiting for the open guy. been throwing the run a lot more than I thought, honestly, which is nice to see. He's kind of waiting for the receivers to get open, which is good. There's a lot of patience there for a young quarterback, which is nice to see. So I think everybody knew the physical attributes were there with Aller. It was how mentally ready is he going to be as a true sophomore who he did play in 10 games last year but never started a game. And I think if you ask everyone in the fan base and even the coaching staff, they would say he's the mental part of the game. He's ahead of where a lot of us thought he would be so far.
I know you guys got a great one in offensive lineman Olomiyu, butchering that name.
Yeah,
But what's rest on that offensive line that Illinois needs to worry about?
yeah. The offensive line's an interesting one because obviously Olu might be a top 5 pick. Never allowed a sack in his career. The left tackle spot we just kind of let it go. It's the other 4 spots everyone focuses on. Caden Wallace, the right tackle, has looked a lot better this year as a 5th-year guy. The light seems to have come on for him. He was a guy who came in as a guard, and they were pretty low on tackles when he got here, so they moved him out to tackle. And I think there was a transitional phase for him, but seems to have been a lot better. The interior is where I think they're still trying to figure it out, and I'm sure we'll get into this. This is where I think the number one concern for Penn State comes facing Illinois is obviously the interior of their defensive line against the interior of Penn State's offensive line, because you have Hunter Norzed, the Cornell transfer, playing center. This is a guy who played tackle at Cornell, played guard last year. Juice Scruggs, second-round pick, off to the NFL at center, so someone had to play center. Norzed moves over, a little banged up this year. I noticed he had a wrap on his hand last week, and snaps were kind of high against West Virginia. If you guys caught any of that game, there were a lot of high snaps, which was weird. And the projected starting left guard, Landon Tangwell, had to medically retire 3 days before the season started. So JB Nelson slid in there. They've been sliding a bunch of guys in. Vega Ione. They say his last name different every year. I don't know. He's a sophomore that the biggest guy in terms of girth on the offensive line, 6'4", 355, I think. They've been bringing him in to rotate in with Sal Wormley too. So they're playing a lot of guys. I think they're still trying to figure out their best 3, I guess, but Norzad is going to start. So it's pretty much the guard spots they're probably still trying to figure out. So that it's kind of the interior could be good. I think those guys have potential. They're just trying to feel their way through it still, and I don't think it's there yet.
So what would you say the Penn State weaknesses outside the offensive line? Let me rephrase that. Mm-hmm. So Penn State is obviously the strong favorite. I'm all over Twitter. Everyone has you guys blowing us out. I think the spread's still at about 14.5.
Yeah.
Let's say Illinois wins on Saturday. How describe the game that Illinois has a chance of winning?
I'd probably say played below 24 is the winning score. I'd probably put it in. I'd start there. I think it's a lower scoring game where Illinois controls the clock. Obviously, with the new clock rules, it's a lot easier to control the clock. So if Illinois can run the ball effectively, and Penn State's had some problems with filling gaps correctly. Delaware's one big score last week was on a missed gap assignment by a linebacker. Him and the defensive tackle each filled the same gap and left the guy wide open. So hopefully it's something they can correct by that happening against Delaware instead of this week. But the interior of the defensive line we're still looking at there. We'll see. Josiah Izzard, who's supposed to be the best run stopper on the defensive line, did not play the first 2 games, but he was a full participant in practice yesterday, according to the reporters. So if they get him back, that'll really help. But I would say it's, Illinois just consistently getting 4 to 5 yards a carry, and then it's 3rd and short, or 2nd and short even, and they could take a shot with Altmaier or let him get out of the pocket. Because if you go back to the West Virginia game, the one area where West Virginia kind of was moving the ball, they ran the ball somewhat well with C.J. Donaldson. I think he was 18 carries for 81 yards, but Garrett Green, the quarterback, there were maybe 3 or 4 3rd and 8 pluses that he either got the first down or turned in a 4th and 1, and they went for it by running. So I noticed Altmaier's been moving a lot this year too. So those are kind of the 2 things for me: containing the quarterback when it is 3rd and long. If they can't do that, Illinois will be in the game, And if Illinois is just consistently getting 4 or 5 yards on first down via the run, that'll also kind of be the big way. It's hard to pass on this Penn State team. The corners are good, and the defensive ends don't give you a lot of time to get the ball out. So it's pretty much if you can run, you can get to them.
Talked a little bit about Drew Aller. What are his weapons? And is it the running game? Is it the wide receivers, tight ends? Where does he like to feed the ball to?
Yeah, so I think to the surprise of everyone the first 2 games, Drew Aller has been receiver happy. The tight ends had 1 catch in the first game, which shocked everyone because apparently West Virginia really struggled with tight ends in 2022, and everyone thought Penn State was going to come out and throw the tight ends 10 times for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they had 1 catch for 8 yards, I think. So that was a shock. They don't throw the running backs a ton. That might change now once they get into Big Ten play. I know they didn't want to show a lot those first 2 games. I think they ran a screen pass in each game, 1. So I know they'd like to get the ball in Singleton's hands in space because he has 4 touchdowns, but it's kind of been the most quiet 4 touchdowns you could imagine. I think his long run on the season is 17 yards, which is not him at all. So I do think they'd like to get them more involved and the tight ends more involved. But so far it's been the receivers. And going into the year, a lot of people were worried because Penn State didn't really have a true number 1 receiver coming in the year with Parker Washington moving on to the NFL and Mitchell Tinsley, the Western Kentucky transfer, also going on the NFL. And it's kind of been receiver by committee, but it's worked. Keandre Lambert-Smith leads the way, big play guy. But outside of that, Malik McClain, the FSU transfers, made some plays. Harrison Wallace, a third-year guy at this point, has made some plays. And Dante Cephas, I think he was like the 5th highest-rated receiver transfer out there this year from Kent State. Still waiting to get him going, but has made a couple catches so far this year. So they've done it by not relying on one person, honestly, which I think has worked to both the benefit of Aller and the offense in general, because there were times with Sean Clifford where when you had KJ Hamler, you get too locked on to trying to get the ball to KJ Hamler. And then when it was just Jahan Dotson, trying to force the ball to him too much. And now I think, and even you saw last year with Clifford, because they didn't really have a true number 1 last year, but this year it's even less than that. I think just not having a go-to guy actually benefits them because they spread the ball around more. It makes them harder to defend.
The good thing about if the passing doesn't work out is Penn State's got those 2 stud running backs.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the 2? Are they very similar? Is one bigger, stronger, one faster? Tell me about them.
Yeah, so the funny thing is, size-wise, I think they're about the same. They're both in that 5'11" to 6-foot range, and they're both between 220 to 230. So build-wise, they're not that different, but they couldn't play any more different, really. Singleton, that home run hitter, looking for the big play, always trying to get the whole explosive, kind of like Travion Henderson from Ohio State, very similar players there. Whereas Allen, a little more physical, will dance around a little more to make his yards. Might have better moves, honestly. Pretty good at breaking ankles. Did that again, broke a couple guys' ankles on Delaware last week on one nice run. So he's a little more the physical in between the tackles guy, where if they need 3 yards, he's the guy they're going to. Whereas Singleton, we're trying to get outside the tackles. We're trying to find a big hole and we're going. And I will say Singleton looks a little bigger. Last year he had a problem where he'd find the hole, but at the last second, someone would get a hand on his foot and trip him up. And what was an 8-yard gain could have been 80. And it looks like he's kind of working on his balance, working on his lower body strength to get out of that. So that's something I'm looking forward to with him. But Allen is actually the better pass catcher and blocker so far, at least from last year. They haven't done a lot so far this year, but that's because he went to IMG Academy, which is pretty much like college in high school. So he's way more advanced with those smaller particular things in the passing game for a running back. So I think that helped him. He kind of had a built-in advantage, but they both do a lot of good things and they both do them differently, which I think is why this duo works so well, because it's not the same player at all.
This Penn State defense has 7 sacks on the year. How would you grade their pass rush so far?
Numbers wise, it's been good, but actually, I know I brought it up earlier with West Virginia and Garrett Green, the quarterback there, escaping. They could use a little work there, I guess, wrapping him up, keeping him in the pocket. But it's been good, and it hasn't really looked dominant in a way. I know they've brought some blitzes with safeties and corners that have, I think 2 of those are via that. So I am looking for the defensive ends to get going a little more, especially Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac, the 2 starters. They're guys that can really wreck a game if they get going. So I do think the numbers are there, but they haven't looked as dominant as we think they're capable of. So I think this will be a good measuring stick week for them too, to see if they can get back to where they were at the end of last year when Chop Robinson had 3 sacks against Maryland and all that stuff. That's where we'd like to get them back to. So I'd give it like a B plus because the numbers are there and the rushes have been there. It's just, it doesn't look as dominant as maybe the numbers would indicate.
Penn State themselves have looked dominant. And, there are a lot of, they're the sexy pick in the preseason about winning the Big Ten. You're watching them every snap, every game. How do you see if Penn State plays to their potential? Where do they fit in the Big Ten?
I think they could knock one of Ohio State and Michigan off. I know a lot of people say they match up better with Ohio State, and I do agree. It's just winning there at the Horseshoe has never been something Penn State's been very good at, whereas Michigan is maybe a worse matchup, but they struggle at Beaver Stadium the way Penn State struggles at Ohio State and at the Big House too. So I do think maybe a little more of an advantage to knock off Michigan, but I don't know if 12-0 is in the cards. I just think these 3 teams are all so good that it's impossible to try to beat 2 of them in the same season. I do think there is a likely scenario where all 3 of them finish 11-1, although maybe 8-1 in Big Ten play is a better way to put it because I don't know what's going to happen with Ohio State and Notre Dame next week. But I do think that they have the capability to go to the Big Ten championship. I think their ceiling is to make the playoff. I don't know about winning a game or going to the championship in the playoffs, but I think the ceiling is, at least for right now, from what I've seen, to make the playoff. But a lot of that has to do with if there's a tiebreaker in the Big Ten East, what's going to happen.
Alec, what are your thoughts of James Franklin? He came in with such a ball of steam, and there was a little bit of a lull there, and now he seems to be harnessing that momentum back. What are your thoughts on James Franklin, and what are your expectations for him moving forward?
Yeah, the situation he came into to go 7-6 the first 2 years and make a bowl game both those years, I thought was an awesome job. That roster was not overly talented, especially on offense. So just to kind of tread water there, I thought was a great job, especially with the scholarship reduction they had. And then obviously 2016, 2017, they still weren't fully back in terms of having depth and especially in the offensive line, but they just hit on talent so well with, Barkley had 4 scholarship offers and Trace McSorley was offered as a safety by every school except the 2 that Franklin was at. So like they did some very good things to make themselves more competitive than maybe they should have been. 2019 comes around and you start to see them build up with 4 stars as backups and that kind of stuff. And then the pandemic pretty much ruined it. Parsons opts out. Journey Brown has to retire. Noah Cain gets hurt on the first drive of this series. Pat Fryermuth's out for the season by the 3rd game, and it falls apart. And then 21, I thought he did a pretty good job of retaining talent that they could have and bringing in some using the portal for the first time was a big thing in 2021. And Clifford gets hurt against Iowa, and I think that ruins what could have been a 9-3 or 10-2 season. Instead, it's 7-5, 7-6 after the bowl game. And then I think when they stayed healthy at the quarterback position last year, they brought back a lot of guys that they could have because I think, NIL starts to become a thing. So retention became a little easier. And they showed, I think, what they could have been capable of doing in 21 and 22. So I think they did a good job of not letting 2 bad years really get to them. Of course, there were some outside factors. I don't think it was that they lost it or anything. Injuries played a huge role in both those seasons going downhill. So I think obviously staying healthy is not something a coach can necessarily control, but they did do a better job, I think, and he has harnessed the momentum more than I think he did after 16 and 17, where 17 they probably should have been undefeated. Letting 2 games like that slip away from them, I ruined a lot of good vibes I think they had going. And now I think after having 2 bad years and almost just coming right back to winning the Rose Bowl, it is more significant than when they won 11 games 3 out of 4 years, because it was just such a quick upcline again where everything went well, where the momentum came back so quick, it almost put more enthusiasm into the program.
What kind of relationship does he have with Penn State and the fans? It's from an outsider, it looks to me like every time he has a great year, that offseason, all of a sudden you hear if a blue blood job opens up, you hear his name being bandied about. Do you think he's a Penn State lifer?
At this point, I guess it depends what happens the next couple of years, but I think it's at the point where they'd have to fire him. I don't know if he'd leave for another job at this point. A lot of the reasons why his name came up with those other jobs the past couple of years was leverage things, not just contract, but they needed to make improvements to the football facility. They needed to get better on NIL, and they have a new president at the university now. They have a new athletic director, and I think that's really helped, because it's not that they were his people, but people before him, were kind of there before him, not really, or not his pick. And these people aren't either, but I think just them coming in, being the new people, whereas he's the established person, has made it easier for him to kind of take charge in a way. So things have gotten better, I think, on that front with the university. They're getting on the same page more. The next big thing is to improve the student athlete living situation, which is way behind compared to most of the country. So that's the one thing they're still working on. But they had improvements to the practice facility, to the just overall football facility, and the stadium actually has improved some of the amenities there and that stuff. So that's helped. NIL has improved, so that's good. With the fans, a lot of people just tell you good recruiter, like bad game day coach. He's had his bad game days a lot, and a lot of that just goes back to that 2017 Ohio State game where everybody just points the finger at that and says that. But you want Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt hasn't won since he left. I don't think he's a terrible game day coach the way it is. His management situations, I guess, are questionable, but when he has the right coordinators around him, like I think he does right now, it makes his job so much easier, and he kind of gets out of his own way a little more. I feel like kind of struggled when the coordinators were new or internal hires, but he brings in Manny Diaz, a guy who had head coaching experience, and Mike Yurcich, the offense coordinator, who's been all over the country with Oklahoma State, Texas, Ohio State. So I think having experienced coordinators that can run their own side of the ball has helped him, where he hasn't really, last year he didn't really do anything to hurt them, I'd say.
Alec, one final question for you from me, at least. What is your prediction for this game, and how many overtimes does it take to get this game done?
Yeah, as someone who was there for that game, I'll pass on the overtime this time around.
Wait, hold on. You were there. Let's get a
Yeah,
story. What was it like being in the stands for that game?
it, it was raining. It was so dreary. It was a noon game. So like when it rains, it's a noon game. You're already just not feeling it. And then Penn State was coming off the rough L against Iowa, where we all felt they should have won if Clifford didn't go down. So like that hurt too. And then they were just not moving the ball, and that team was so bad at running the ball. I think they had like 60 rushing yards in that game. They were so bad. It was just so boring. And then the overtimes actually made it interesting at first, and then it just drags on so long where I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm not gonna feel good either way, because, like, no offense, that wasn't a very good Illinois team at the time, and I'm like, so we're gonna beat them by 2 in the 10th overtime. Like, I guess it's cool. I'm here watching history. Was pretty much the way I looked at it at that point. I was like, no one else is really ever gonna be able to say this, that they were at a 9 overtime college football game. So I was like, I'm just gonna take that and run with it, because either way, Penn State was not coming out looking good from that game. And so I was just sitting there like, I'm just gonna soak this in and not care either way at this point. After like the sixth overtime.
Did the announcer actually say, "You are now watching the longest game in college football history"?
No, but I do remember there was this girl in the row in front of me who, when what did they both? I can't remember if they both scored or both missed to get into the ninth one from the eighth. But right after the final play happened, this girl like looked it up on her phone and started screaming, and it was like, oh my god, history or whatever. And I was like, you got to be kidding me! We're celebrating this right now. Like it was so bad, but that's how I knew from that. But yeah, that I'll pass on the overtime this time around. This Illinois team, I actually like. I a little surprised how the season started. I think the interior of the defensive line is really good. I know they're still physical on offense. We had this. We ranked our 1 through 12 hardest, easiest games before the season. We put this at 3. We put it above Iowa. We put it above Michigan State. Just going on the road, 11 a.m. local kick, physical defensive line. I don't. You know, Illinois kind of struggled with the 2 mobile quarterbacks Toledo and Kansas had. Drew Aller is a very good quarterback. I don't think he's nearly as mobile as those 2 guys are. And Johnny Newton had 2 sacks last week, and from what I saw, Daniels, the Kansas quarterback, slipped out of 2 more. It seemed like. I think that I don't know if Aller gets out of those. I think that makes it a more interesting game. I'm surprised a little bit by the struggles the Illinois defense has had. So I think Penn State will actually come out throwing and try to get after that young secondary. Obviously, replacing 4 NFL guys is not easy at all. So I think that's where they'll go. I definitely see Illinois giving them trouble, especially on the interior of the defensive line. But if I had to pick, I'm kind of in the Penn State 31 to 35 range with Illinois between 13 and 17. So 34 to 14, 34 to 17 is something I see.
I think at this part of the season, that sounds about right. Austin and I are 2 of the more optimistic Illini fans that you're going to find. And I think right now we're just trying to figure ourselves out. We have a new defensive staff in place. We have a bunch of new players starting. I do think that had this game come 5, 6, 7 weeks later, after the coaching staff has made their adjustments and the game is in Champaign, we would have the opportunity for an upset. But I think your score prediction for this Saturday, at least, is pretty close to what mine is going to be. I'm not giving up on the season yet, but I just think the couple of games I just watched of your guys comparing to what we've been performing, I just think we're at different parts of the season. Like you guys are a finely tuned machine at this point, whereas we're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Alec, how about you tell us about your podcast?
Yeah, so it's called Booze, Bets, and Ball, a Penn State football podcast. Before we kind of got in with big banter, we were not really Penn State central, although it was all Penn State guys on there. We were trying to do stuff from all over the country, but focusing more on Penn State now. So if you look it up on podcast platforms, Booze, Bets, and Ball, a Penn State football podcast, it'll come up. Looking for it on YouTube, it's actually under Whitaker Media, Whitaker, because I do other stuff on there. I do baseball stuff. So we have all kinds of videos on that channel. So the Twitter is at 3B Pod PSU. I didn't put the full name on the thing. That's my bad. But that's where you can find it on Twitter. So that's we have a lot of different places you can find us. But yeah.
Alec, I want to thank you for your time, and I won't say best of luck because this is about Big Ten play.
Right.
It means business.
It does. Thank you.
Good luck against Michigan and Ohio State.
Yeah, that we will need. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Alec.
You got it.
That was Alec, part of the Big Banter Podcast Network, and yeah, this is going to be kind of a blowout. It's not going to be a fun game.
On to next week. we
can
do it.
On to next week. Let's take our frustrations out on FAU of what we experience in Kansas and Penn State. But who knows? Brett Bielema does pull some magic out of his hat. He did it at Arkansas. He's done it at Wisconsin. Maybe he'll do it again for Illinois like he did against Penn State in Happy Valley. So, yeah.
I hope you're right. I know there's been a lot of talk going on in that coach's room, and so excited to see what kind of adjustments they make on Saturday.
As we wrap up, what is your final score prediction for Illinois Penn State?
I'll say 38-21, Penn State.
I'm going to go with the reciprocal 41-14. I don't think this is
Ugh.
going to be much of a game. All the great expectations I had are kind of sunk because of that Kansas game. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Kansas and Toledo are just great, and Toledo's going to represent the group of 5 in the New Year's Six bowls. Maybe I'm wrong. So maybe this just was a tough stretch of the schedule, and then Illinois comes out with a 10-2 record still, and these are the 2 losses.
Yeah, I mean, going into the last 2 weeks, I was very optimistic with my predictions, and hopefully, maybe now going the reverse, maybe they'll surprise us a little bit.
Absolutely. Sonny, it was a pleasure. I will see you next Tuesday.
All right, Austin, take care.